What is going on, everybody? Welcome to my Week 11 playoff rankings reaction. In this video, I will be looking at all the teams that were ranked in the top 25 of the playoffs and talking about them. But before I get into this video, if you have liked my content, subscribe to the channel and like the video. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Starting off, number 25 is Kansas State. I'm not surprised that Kansas State is number 25, being they do have a pretty good resume and they do look like a top 25 team. Their only losses come to 3 top 25 teams, Missouri, Oklahoma State, and Texas, and all of them were road games. So good job to Kansas State. They are 6-0 at home, and they play really well at home, and they definitely deserve a top 25 spot. Number 24 is North Carolina. Not surprised that North Carolina is in the top 25 either, as they do have a pretty good record, and the committee does value 2-loss Power 5 teams. Now I know North Carolina had that bad loss to Virginia and they recently lost to Georgia Tech, but you can't deny that they were playing good and they were 6-0 to start the season. At number 23 is Tulane. Tulane is the best group of 5 team according to the playoff rankings, and I'm starting to think that Tulane will get a New Year's 6 bowl spot. I was high on Air Force before, but they have dropped out of the rankings after that horrible loss. Number 22 is Iowa. Not much to say about Iowa. They don't play offense, they play defense. Number 21 is Arizona. I think Arizona is one of the better 3-loss teams in the country. There are some good 3-loss teams ahead of them, which I'll get to in a second, but Arizona definitely deserves a spot in the top 25, as they have had a tough resume and they have some decent wins against Oregon State and UCLA, and they also play tough against USC and Washington. At number 20 is Notre Dame. Notre Dame's been a pretty good team, and I was high on them because of how tough they've been playing this year. Despite their 3 losses, they had a tough game against Ohio State. They also had a tough loss against Louisville on the road, and a lot of people aren't shocked that Notre Dame lost that game, being that they did play 3 brutal games before that game. At number 19 is LSU. LSU is coming off a tough loss to Alabama, and they are 6-3, and they are a decent team. Their 3 losses come to Ole Miss, Alabama, and Florida State. All 3 teams are in the top 10, so LSU has had a really good resume this year, and they deserve to be the highest ranked 3-loss team. At number 18 is Utah. Utah has had a pretty good resume, and their only losses come to teams in Oregon against Oregon and Oregon State, and both those teams are ranked in the top 15. At number 17 is Oklahoma. Oklahoma was a playoff favorite, but they are now 7-2 with back-to-back losses, and the committee did make the right decision to drop them down lower, as they are not living up to the hype they had. And Oklahoma has ultimately been knocked out of the playoffs for good this year. But going forward in the next couple of years, I wonder what they'll do. They're going to the SEC. It's going to be a tough conference to play in. It's not going to be easy, but they do have some talent returning, so we'll see what they can do. At number 16 is Kansas. Kansas has a really good win against Oklahoma, and they are ranked ahead of Oklahoma, which is not shocking. Number 15, another Big 12 team. I got to give props to the playoff committee for ranking Oklahoma State in the top 15. I do think they deserve it. I am a little shocked that they're only 2-point favorites against UCF this weekend. I think Oklahoma State, if they were playing the way they are now at the start of the season, they could definitely be a playoff contender. Number 14 is Missouri. Missouri has also been a pretty decent team. They've had some lackluster wins against Middle Tennessee, but ultimately they have some good wins against Kansas State and Kentucky, but they did fall short to Georgia and LSU. Number 13 will be playing number 14 this weekend. It'll be a good battle, but Tennessee is a decent team. At number 12 is Oregon State. They are the highest ranked 7-2 team, coming in at number 12. I'm not really surprised about Oregon State being the highest ranked 2-loss team, as they have had some good wins this season against Utah and against UCLA, and ultimately they are playing in a very improved Pac-12 conference this year, and their only losses come to Arizona and Washington State in 3-point games. At number 11 is Louisville. Now, if Louisville wins out, will they be in the playoffs? I think there's a very slight chance, but they will need some help, and beating Florida State is not going to be easy for them. But there is a road to the playoffs, but it's just not going to be easy. After that loss to Pitt, I don't know if the committee will select them. At number 10 is Penn State. Penn State's got a big game coming up against Michigan this week, so we'll see what they can do against Michigan. I'm not really high on this Penn State team, as they really lack on the offensive side. They do have a really good defense, but they just do not play offense. At number 9 is Ole Miss. They also have a huge game coming up against number 2, Georgia. Ole Miss and Penn State both have big games that could possibly boost them into the top 7 or top 6 and put them in the playoff race. But Georgia and Michigan, they're 2 of the best teams in the country, and it's going to be tough games for Ole Miss and Penn State this weekend, but I'm excited to see those games turn out. At number 8 is Alabama. Alabama's really been playing good football lately. They have some decent wins. The last 2 weeks, Alabama has beat LSU and Tennessee by double digits. They did have that close win against Arkansas. Arkansas has played some teams close this year. Alabama did win that game. Alabama also has a good win against Ole Miss and Texas A&M. Alabama has played a pretty tough schedule, but now it gets a little easier, and they are basically a lock for the SEC championship as long as they win one more game, as they only have 2 more SEC games left against Kentucky and Auburn, and they play Chattanooga, which will be an easy win for them. At number 7 is Texas. Texas does have that head-to-head win against Alabama, and their only loss comes to Oklahoma. So I do think Texas is rightfully at number 7. And at number 6 is Oregon. Oregon has looked very good lately, and I did make a video talking about them and how they are a very improved team this year. And I do think Oregon does deserve the number 6 spot. But after what the people said on the show today, I was watching the show. They made a really good point. I think it was Greg McElroy that said it. I think that's his name. But he mentioned that at the top, they have Ohio State, Georgia, and Michigan. And they go by resume. But then you have Oregon, Texas, and Alabama. And Oregon does not have a better resume than Texas and Alabama. But Oregon is ranked ahead of them. And it's really, the top teams are resume, and 6 through 8, Oregon, Texas, Alabama, it's really an eye test. So he mentioned that the committee needs to be more consistent about this. And I kind of do agree with that. If they're going to go by eye test, they need to go by eye test. And only eye test. And if they're going to go by resume, they need to go by resume. But ultimately, I think they should kind of mix it up and go by both. Because you can't really look at teams just because of their resume, and you can't really look at teams just because of how dominant they've been against terrible teams. Oregon has looked very dominant this year, but they also haven't played a super tough schedule. But they did dominate Utah, which is pretty impressive, because Utah's not a terrible team. And at number 5 is Washington. I do think Oregon is a better team than Washington, but there's no way the committee can rank Oregon above Washington. Being Washington is 9-0, and they do have that head-to-head over Oregon. Washington is one of the better teams in the country, but there may be some question marks on if they have a shot at winning the national title this year because of their games against Stanford and Arizona State, and they've really been playing lackluster football since that Oregon game. But they did have a decent win against USC last week. Maybe that could get them back on track to winning a national title this year, but it's going to be hard for Washington. Their defense struggles, and they're very one-dimensional on the offensive side. But their run game has got going a little bit lately. But in a rematch against Oregon, that's going to be a tough game for them because Oregon's been playing really good football lately. At number 4, they have Florida State. I think Florida State should be higher. Just like they mentioned, it's all about the resume. It's all about the eye test. You got to look at both. And I know Florida State struggled against Boston College, and they were struggling against Pitt for a little bit, and they got outgained by Clemson. They've had some tough games. But what I have noticed about Florida State is that they do play 4 quarters. Speaking of Florida State, I will be making a video on them tomorrow. And it's going to be a big video. I'm doing a lot of research on it, so I hope you guys tune in for that video. But Florida State, they definitely are a good team, and I do think they should be higher because they do have a good resume, and they ultimately have looked like a good team, and they do play 4 quarters. At number 3 is Michigan. Now, I do say Florida State should be ranked higher, but it may be hard to say because of how dominant Michigan has looked. It really comes down to a balance of eye test and resumes, and Michigan has been dominant all year, but they haven't played anybody. But Michigan, they do have a couple brutal games coming up against Penn State and against Ohio State. So if they lose one, they might be in trouble. We'll see what they can do. And will the cheating scandals catch up to them? I don't know. At number 2, the committee has Georgia. I wasn't sure if Georgia was going to be number 1 this week after how bad Ohio State played last week. And after how better Georgia's been playing. But they did keep Ohio State at 1, and Ohio State does have the better resume, so they are going by resume in the top 4. But if they really are going by resume, would they have Florida State higher? I don't know. Some of this confuses me, but Georgia is number 2. And at number 1, Ohio State, I do not think they're the best team in the country. Maybe they have the best resume, but their offense has looked average at best. They really struggle on the offensive side, just like Penn State, but they're probably a little bit better than Penn State on the offensive side. And they do have Marvin Harrison Jr., but the quarterback play is just not there. We will see what Ohio State can do going forward and if they can improve on the offensive side. But that's going to do it for the video. I hope you guys all enjoyed the video. And if you did, hit the subscribe button and like the video. And also consider joining my Discord. It will be in the description below. And peace out, guys.